Navigating COVID-19 webinar series with our experts in cybersecurity from the newly rebranded company CyberClan. Now, many of you have transitioned to a new environment in these last several weeks. I'm no exception. You can see that I'm at home. Many of us are in different environments right now. The Chamber and Narrative Research, like many other businesses, are working in these new home environments. We're connecting to our personal Wi-Fi, we're using our work laptops, we're using Zoom for meetings and webinars, and we're sharing documents through the cloud, many of us anyway. I'm sure you're all curious about cybersecurity in this time of COVID and home offices, and that's why we've invited CyberClan here to talk about security challenges at home. With things changing and moving so quickly, it can be easy to overlook some of the very important security issues of working at home. And we're excited to hear from Richard and Chris today on home office cybersecurity. Richard D'Souza is CEO and president of CyberClan since its inception in 2006. And he brings over 20 years of comprehensive cybersecurity experience in areas including incident response services, computer forensics, security, secure architecture, security assessments, audits, cyber extortion, and dark web investigation. Sounds fascinating. And Chris Roberts is Chief Information Security Officer at CyberClan. He's served as CISO or advisor for several entities and organizations around the globe. His most recent projects are focused within the deception, identity, cryptography, and services space. And he has over 25 plus years of experience and has founded or worked with organizations specializing in a whole bunch of things that I don't know about, like open, human research, intelligence gathering, cryptography as well, and deception technologies. Now we're going to have time for questions at the end, so feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be able to address them hopefully at the end. If you are commenting in the chat box, it's just a reminder that there's an option to address your message to all panelists, which will just come to me, Chris, Richard, and Sandra, who's hosting, or you can address it to panelists and all attendees, and then everybody who's attending the session today will be able to see, so you can choose how you'd like it to appear. So Chris and Richard, thank you very much for joining us, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Cool. Well, thank you very, very much for having us here. Absolute pleasure, and good afternoon, I think, to everybody in that general neck of the woods. So I think with that, we will we'll step on if everybody is okay with it. So we're going to go through, as it says, probably 30, 40 minutes worth of conversations, and then we will have a good set of Q&A afterwards. So real simple agenda. Who is here, which was kind of mostly already done, which was much appreciated. What's happening? So let's get a bit of a status of the union, what the lie of the land is, what's going on at the moment. What do we actually do about it? So we're not going to sit here and go, oh my gosh, the world is broken, there's big problems, right? It's going to say, look, here are the issues and challenges, and actually what do we do about looking at some of them? How do we actually partner and work with the Chamber of Commerce to actually help them become, you know, to basically disseminate the information just as we're doing now? Why now? Obviously some questions and answers on that one. A couple of wise words from somebody else, and then some of the open mic questions. So who are we? Well, the nice thing about it is it was already kind of introduced. Richard, would you like to say anything else on this one at the moment?
Just basically just based here in Vancouver, British Columbia, providing cybersecurity. We're passion driven. Chris and I have, you know, we're on the same wavelength, as you can see, and we'll tell you how it is basically, and you know, we'll have an open discussion here today. So thank you.
Cool, thank you. And I had a very, very nice intro, so I'm just going to leave it at that on my one, which would be kind of nice. Let's have a quick one about, you know, what's the logic for us being here? And I think this is something that's kind of fairly helpful. Obviously, we've spent a long time focusing on the small to medium businesses. I mean, that's a lot of the work that we're doing. A lot of us that have come from some very large organizations have worked with them effectively and have spent many, many years working in and out of them. So if we take a look at the CyberClan side of the world and we go, okay, let's take a look at where the key focuses are and the messages that we're going to bring to this conversation. And obviously part of that comes around the emergency incident response side of things. So we get brought into a lot of incidents on a very regular basis, in other words, on almost a daily basis at this point in time. So we've got a lot of the knowledge and experience, especially in the small to medium business market, as to what's happening, what's going on. The same thing with the testing and the assessment side of it. Obviously, part of the work that we're getting up to is that testing and is that assessment work. And so let's take a look at what that's trending and how that's trending over the last couple of years and how we're looking into the future and how can we help organizations become more effective. Same thing with the managed service providers. Again, one of the big things that we'll talk about in a little bit is the preparedness of the small to medium business organizations, the preparedness of a lot of the companies out there, and even some of the big organizations, and where they don't necessarily have their own set of eyes in their own security products. What do we do? How can we bring that to the table? And how can we help people understand the logic and the reasoning for it? Consulting services is an awesome one. There's some amazing folks out there. And the nice thing about it is we have some very, very good contacts and obviously access to a lot of them. So it's really nice to be able to lean on people. And again, it's, when you take a look at the SMB market, unfortunately, a lot of the security industry is focused on the whales, the big companies, the Fortune 2000s and whatever, and wanting to work with them. A lot of the smaller organizations tend to get left off to the side. So what we've done is we've pretty much tapped a lot of the big folks on the shoulder and said, hey, we need some help too. So we tend to try to bring that one. Restoration system remediation, our job is when everything's going wrong is to come in there as the calming influence, help organizations and help them understand, we have processes, we have the NIST stuff, we have all the 27001 and everything else is to help organizations understand where they are, where they need to get to. And as Richard very, very eloquently pointed out, Canadian owned and operated, despite the fact that some of us have got some strange accents. Any thoughts or anything you want to add on to that one at all? Richard, we all good?
I think we're good, yeah.
Nice. All right. So let's take a look at what's actually happening in the industry at the moment. And this is the industry as a whole. I think it's frustrating. It's, the image up on the top right-hand side, unfortunately, says a lot about the state of security these days. The global average mean time, 197 days is the average. Some of that's come out of, as you can see on the bottom right-hand side, tech juries. Some of it came out of Ponymon, the FBI, and various other institutes. The numbers are all over the place, to be perfectly honest. You've got some breaches which are actually detected relatively quickly, and then you have others that go on for several years before an organization actually understands that somebody's inside there. And that's some of the biggest challenges is you look at the supply chain and you look at how organizations are obviously interacting with each other, and where one key organization maybe is breached and doesn't have the awareness, and how that intelligence that the adversary and the attacker is able to do is then able to look across that in supply chain. And obviously, unfortunately, the small and medium organizations are one that tend to bear the brunt of it. Mean time to recover, 70 days. So once you know that somebody who is nefarious is creeping around your system, it's then unfortunately taking another 2 months or longer for somebody to actually recover. Again, part of the reason for us having a lot of those recovery and remediation services is to speed that up and become more effective at it. Obviously, organizations targeted by phishing attacks. We all see the emails coming in. We're all seeing what's happening, the telephone calls, and especially we look at the situation that we have now with COVID and a very distributed workforce. And then we have to go, how do we manage those people that are actually now on the front line? How do we help them become more effective in that? And how do we help them understand what is a good email and what is a fake one, et cetera, et cetera. You guys can read the ones as well as I can. Global cost of a breach around 4 million. We'll actually get into the smaller side of that one. And then the records. That's a global number as to how many records we are losing a day. It's in the billions, obviously, per year. It's ridiculous. And this is everything from, personally identifiable information, credit card data, cardholder information, healthcare information, intellectual property, et cetera, et cetera. Again, one of the challenges on here is we have so much information, we generate so much data, and we haven't done a good job. We haven't been good custodians at actually managing it, understanding it, safeguarding it, et cetera, et cetera. So one of those challenges we're dealing with. And I'm actually on another webinar coming up fairly soon when we're talking about the healthcare data. And again, with COVID, how we have to move that data around effectively and still maintain the integrity of it. And then the last one, which is, the kind of scary side of the world, the statistics, 33% chance of being breached in the next 24 months. Obviously one of the things we do is we pair up very effectively with a lot of cyber liability insurance companies. So part of the role that we play is we will help work with those cyber liability insurance companies and help them understand the state of the union, what is going on, and how to actually protect businesses more effectively. So Some interesting stuff. Not the best days out there, unfortunately. And then, unfortunately, when we start looking at the smaller side of the organizations, and again, this is the SMB for us is anywhere from like 250-ish people inside an organization and lower. You guys are getting attacked more. It's simple. Attacks are up. 2020, 141% increase. And again, part of that logic is the larger companies are taking more time and more work and more effort to be breached. And obviously, they still are being breached. So as an attacker, as an adversary, if I need to monetize my time more effectively, I'm going to go after the smaller organizations. And especially at times that we have now with a distributed workforce, with fragmented people all over the place, it's much easier for an adversary and an attacker to be able to get into those organizations, exploit them, and be able to get out fairly quickly. As it says, almost 60% of attacks against small to medium businesses. Average cost is an interesting one. I mean, those numbers are all over the place. And a lot of this comes from the stuff that we know and we see as being, we're in these on a daily basis, and how much time, effort, and financially, how much it costs the organization. As it says, lowest end, I think we've seen is 45, 50K, and somebody got away with it on that one, to be honest. And then upper regions is back to the multi-million breaches, which is really where the cyber liability insurance comes in, which is really where we will come in and really start to help an organization understand how they recover on this one. Unfortunately, some of the upsetting stats is, a lot of the organizations don't actually survive after a breach. Again, if I'm a larger organization, I see that you've had an issue, then how do we work through that supply chain? How can I now trust you with my data? How can I trust the integrity and all these other things? And I mean, there's a lot of stuff. We don't have the protection on there, no antivirus. The crazy one to me, and again, probably because I work in this industry, is a lot of organizations still don't think that they will be targeted. There are so many conversations, and Richard, I mean, you can chime in on this one as well, is where somebody's like, oh, I'm not a target. I don't have anything useful at all. And you're like, actually, yeah, you do.
Yeah, it's all about information at the end of the day. I mean, information can be used in many ways. Basically, this PII data, which is, basically can help threat actors, accomplish identity theft, for example, or IP information, any sensitive information, that client information. Information is king in this day and age. So it's important that we protect this. And especially SMBs, right, that are kind of working from home. It's important for them, especially in Canada, to, they have the knowledge, the understanding and access to services, secure services like collaboration services that we are all using today. Right now, we're using these services for this event, right? So ensuring the security of the video, the content, the audio, and all these other aspects that go. This is all information, right? So just kind of want to share from our perspective, when we designed our security infrastructure, we built in security principles when we designed this from day one. So 2006, our security guys, and Chris, he loves it, right? We sat down with our team and said, hey, we're going to come across, these challenges in the future. How do we mobilize our workforce? How do we build in security? So what we decided was, all our engineers, our incident responders were assigned a hardened secure laptop with all the tools and the safeguards built in. So, they could basically work from anywhere. So we kind of built this idea from day one, and secure VPN and so forth, which we'll talk about today. So Chris, back to you.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I think it's the biggest challenge, or one of the other challenges, is unfortunately, like a lot of things, when something happens, when you get hit, is typically the first time that somebody goes, oh, we should have practiced that. Perfect example is exactly what we're going through now with the COVID side of it. You had this initial mad panic when everybody realized that they had to be social distancing when they couldn't actually be going to the office. All of a sudden, so many organizations suddenly went, how do we do this? And I think this is where the frustration is for a lot of us in the industry. Is like, look, we've been talking about these things for years. There's things called tabletop exercises. There's things called plans, incident response plans, and there's a playbook. And for those of us that have come out of the military, it's that concept of crawl, walk, run, dry fire, live fire. You go through stages and you learn. And as humans, and again, this is the people side of the people, process, and technology, So it's really, you know, again, with the Chamber of Commerce and actually working with those guys and going, okay, how do we put maybe an education program in place? How do we run some workshops here? How could it be possible to impart the information so that so many of you, when something happens, when something goes wrong, when the problem hits, how could we actually empower you to make some effective decisions very, very quickly, as opposed to, unfortunately, picking up the yellow pages and going, who do I call? Not the right time to be doing it. And then obviously the last one on this one is something fairly near and dear to a lot of what we're trying to do, is the awareness training. Simple stuff, just easy, simple, hey, how to spot a scam, how to deal with it, how to actually not click through things, and you know, the 101 other things. So just some really simple things about it. Now, so we've gone through the scary stuff. We've got everybody going, oh, good grief, the world is coming to an end. Obviously the question is, what do we actually do about it? So we've got a couple of slides on this one. I like this one because it really goes through some very, very simple procedures and processes and some simple thoughts on this one. Education and training. And a lot of that can be done simpler. On the left-hand side is actually a screenshot from the WISER training. It's one of those things that's online. We have the ability to obviously put that into organizations as part of the services, and you can run through the training. It's 60, 90-second videos just to help everybody inside an organization understand how to be more effective. Policies, procedures, and controls, even just simple things. You don't have to go to the nth degree, pick up the entire folder for the NIST 853, which is like, you know, this thick, but at least doing some of the simple things in there, at least having an understanding of what the data is and where the data is. The controls, you know, to Richard's point, as we look at things as a security organization, we're obviously looking at other people's data. How do we make sure that we do that effectively and as securely as we can? Let's be very, very blunt on this one. There is no silver bullet. There is no perfect solution. There is no easy answer. If anybody actually comes to you and says they can solve the security problem, you are allowed to take them out and drop them into the wilderness and, you know, feed them to the bears or whatever. Because it's all about reducing risk. It's all about understanding, reducing risk, and then how do we help an organization mature? As it says, the people, the process, and then maybe technology after that. Richard, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of bring everyone back to what's happening in the threat landscape space, basically. So we have solutions here, which Chris has clearly mentioned, right, from education policies, and we understand this, and we're going to talk more about this. You know, in terms of what's happening out there, you know, a lot of the threat actors are basically ramping up. You know, they understand we're all online. There are more targets being exposed. Everyone's working from home. A government entity basically, you know, I was talking to was like, hey, you know, our firewalls are maximum. We have a lot of VPN users, and we're out there. We're at capacity here. So, you know, I mean, threat actors, again, you know, they're using this pandemic to kind of, you know, launch various malicious campaigns, spam emails, business email compromise, ransomware, malicious domain, links embedded in, you know, in emails, in Slack, you name it. They're trying everything. They're basically like, this is an opportunity. We're going to try and capitalize on this, right? So this is what's happening. We've also seen a lot of activity, basically, you know, remote desktop protocol. Basically what this is, you know, as you access your systems, you know, from home or your office systems, and if you don't have proper security measures in place, threat actors are going to expose that. You know, they're going to run automated tools to try different combination of passwords, brute force, any credentials for campaigns. And again, it's like any other ransomware out there. You know, it comes as an attachment with your email. You know, it's a VBS extension. Now they could say, you know, here's a cure for coronavirus or COVID-19, or here's how you would, I don't know.
I mean, it's anything. It's like, hey, here's the latest spreadsheet from the office, or hey, I need you to check this out. Or, I mean, some of my favorite ones on that one is when it looks like it's coming from an official government source. So, the Canadian government sends out, certain things, and it looks like it's official. And if you don't open it immediately, it's something's going to happen to the company. I mean, it's amazing how simple these are, but they prey upon the humans like, oh, I have to deal with this as an authority figure, or there's empathy, it gets preyed upon.
Yeah, if I was a threat actor and I had the opportunity, I would probably register domains with the BC Gov or provincial government entities domains, and then I would launch a massive spear phishing attack on targeted victims with my malware, and I could basically, I would have a lot of people clicking. I don't even know what the numbers would look like, but that would,
yeah, it's
that'd be
huge.
scary. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, just think about it. It's simple
Yeah.
things, and how do we protect? So Chris, how do we protect ourselves from this? Let's talk about the solution here.
Yeah, let's talk about some stuff on this one. So this is, I love this one, the Mr. Bean one. You clicked the link, didn't you? And this is a tough one because we shouldn't really stop people from clicking the link. There's an argument to say, don't you actually, I mean, we send so many legitimate links out. We send them out with Zoom every 10 seconds these days. So there has to be a way of actually educating people to understand what to click on and what not to click on. And so to me, this is the fix the human. And this again comes down to the education and the awareness, just some simple stuff that can be done. And again, I look what we have and I look how we approach this from the CyberClan aspect. And we do look at the human side of it. So, I mean, I remember when I first started here, the first thing I do is go through an actual awareness training program. And it helps me understand where's the stance of the company, what's going on, whether it's a bunch of 30-second, 60-second videos. They're easy and they're simple and they're fun. And it really helps you as a human understand what you're doing, where you're doing, and how you're doing it. So, I mean, there's no crazy barrier to entry on this stuff. And I think, again, it comes back to let's look at the human first. Exactly to your point, stop the easy ways in. We all like to chase the modern attacks. We all like to think that we need to defend ourselves against simple, APTs, so the advanced persistent threats. But we don't need to do that when we have some of the basic stuff open, when we don't have our network separated or segmented. And especially with the COVID stuff, that's a lot harder to do, obviously. But it's still possible. And, when we don't have our firewalls configured properly or our antivirus on or any of the simple stuff, or we've got default user IDs and passwords all over the place. I think that's one of the big challenges. And I mean, Richard, you could probably talk to that one for a while on that one. So
yeah, I'm going to bring up a business email compromise. We're seeing a lot of these very simple attacks. And let me give you a quick scenario here. So you have basically business email compromise, which is your Outlook, your G Suite, and scam emails are coming in. So for a threat actor to really get in and dupe someone, so I would basically want to target a vendor or a supplier, someone that you trust, right? Say it could be IT. As part of our red team, we basically want to mimic IT. And if you get an email from IT, your IT administrator saying, hey, we've been hit, can you please change your password? Here's a link. And it's a legitimate site to change your password. Chances are you're going to change your password, right? So we've got you there. So exploiting relationship is huge for a threat actor. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect is for a patient threat actor, I would basically, once I gain access, I would basically understand and go through all the inboxes. I would really map out all the relationships, understand where finance sits in this chain of command and who is calling the shots, right? And then I would basically send an email from a CEO or a CEO, whoever, to the finance individual to initiate a wire transfer to a known vendor, but perhaps with different bank accounts, or tweak the bank account. And once the funds are gone, I think if it hits the US and then the UK, and then it heads off into EU, and then after 24, 48 hours, it's gone. You don't know where the funds went. So here's a problem. So Chris, how would one solve this issue?
So I think, again, there's a couple of things, and it's understanding, and to your point, it's understanding and realizing, number one, that those things happen. But again, it comes back down to the human. Richard, if you send me a message at like 2:00 in the morning going, hey, I need you to wire transfer me money because I'm about to do some business, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call you. I'm going to validate that you actually want me to do this. So, I trust you, but I'm going to validate that too. And it's helping the human. So it's part educating the human, and it's part that trust and validate. So it's part policy and procedure, but there's some extra steps that we always should be putting in place. And this, instead of actually reacting, instead of, oh my gosh, immediately deciding that we have to do this. The other big one is you hit on it, is email. So a perfect example. I mean, every now and again, I'll get one that looks like it's an Office 365 email. Hey, your password needs to change, otherwise you can't get in, and all hell's going to break loose. Well, rather than clicking on that, let me actually open up the legitimate application itself. I'll ignore the email, I'll understand it, but I'll actually open up the legitimate email, not from their link, but directly from my system. And I'll go through and go, oh, it's not even asking me for a password. Great, another spam email. So it's realizing and it's understanding that. Plus, by the way, when my email opens up, I have 2 factors of authentication. And, I don't just put in a password and it lets me into everything. It'll either send me a text message. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. Or it asks me for an authentication code that comes off of like either a tab or something else like that one. So there are ways of doing this, and you either separate the duty or you have those multiple factors. And I think that's a big thing. And those are easy things to put in place. And to that point, it really brings up that you don't have a perimeter. So many organizations are obviously relying on the cloud services and are relying on their own set of third parties. And when we do that, we tend to take our eye off of those security requirements. Like, it's in the cloud, it'll be looked after. Well, actually, it won't be looked after. How do I look after my stuff still more effectively? Who owns the cryptographic keys that are used on the cloud? Who else has access to my system? How do I manage those user IDs and passwords effectively when people come and go and the ebb and flow that we see inside companies? And then obviously with everybody remote, you definitely don't have a perimeter. How many people do you have that are using their own home computers? And how do you manage those effectively? So there's some really interesting stuff on that one.
And Chris, I'm just going to add, so we actually have a very large provider here that have outsourced their data backups to a third party, and the executive team is struggling to understand where their data is, what's being provided in terms of backup, where is their encryption key, who has control over their data. So as part of our strategy is to kind of take that strategy, get control on that data, and give it back to our clients to ensure they have control over their own data, and they can make decisions where their data resides, how they, who has access to the data. If something happens, the provider goes down, or if they get hit with ransomware, they can restore data effectively, very quickly, and security of the data too. So
yeah, I think that's huge. And again, to that data thing, that kind of hits that next one, which is passwords. Everybody that's on this call right now, I have one ask of you. Go out, open up a web browser, and just Google top 20 most used passwords. The first one should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The most complicated one there, I think, is 1 through 9. If any of your passwords are any of those ones, and that's on your phone, your computer, your email, any of those stuff, if you're on any of those top 20, change them, please. It's just simple stuff like that. And also, if the password to your bank is the same as the password to your email, is the same as the password to your Gmail, is the same as the password to your gaming or adult entertainment system, you want to separate those. So again, it's just simple stuff about these. And how about we use passphrases? And a lot of this, again, comes from what we see. So obviously, as the organization, we get involved in all these incidents. We take a look at them and go, as best as we can sometimes, what was the root cause? Was it that somebody clicked? Was it that somebody's password got compromised on, Yahoo, and it was the same password they used on the bank or the financials? Or, to Richard's point, the escrow system that's now sitting in the middle of Estonia, unfortunately. And so if you have those commonalities, start separating them. Start going, hey, I'm going to have one core set of user accounts and passwords that I use for the really, really important stuff. And I'm going to have some other stuff I really don't care so much about. So really understand that and look at passphrases. Some interesting ways of doing passphrases. And then the get a plan. We talked about this one in the SMB statistics. It really isn't a case of if. It isn't a case of I'm not going to get hit. It isn't a case of, oh, nobody cares about me. You're worth money, either directly or indirectly. Your data's worth something to me, and I don't care if I use you as a stepping stone to get to other people. it really isn't a case of if, it's a case of when you get hit. You just haven't been far enough down the queue yet. So get a plan in place while you still have the time. You know, again, I'll put the CyberClan hat on and go, that's why we're here. We're here as that trusted party. Same thing with the Halifax, the Chamber of Commerce on here. It's, you know, these are a trusted resource set of people that we can actually talk with, and you guys can go to and go, look, help me understand my business. Help me understand what happens if, who do I talk to when something goes on? How do I run a tabletop exercise? So some really easy, simple, basic stuff that does not involve you spending thousands and thousands on new technology, when quite honestly, a lot of the time, a lot of it is either how do I get hold of it, or in the case of what we have with the MSSP side of things, how do I take what I have and hand it to somebody else and go, can you look after it for me, please? And not everybody wants to stand up their own security operations or network operations center, or doesn't even have the resources to do this. And again, that's kind of where we come in. It's like, look, we got you covered. We'll look at it for you 24/7/365. And in doing so, you can now focus on your core business. We've got you covered. Here's how we're going to help reduce the risk and increase the maturity. Get on and make the widgets. So that's kind of some of the fix the basics. Let's have some other questions on this one. So some other good questions that we tend to help organizations ask. And in doing so, it tends to reveal what is going on and what's happening on this one. And obviously the first one, you know, to Richard's point, it's all about the data. It's where is it, who's got it, who has access to it, and what am I going to do with it? You know, officially, we call that data handling standards and life cycle data, and everything from when you get the data to when you destroy the data has all to be questions on there. But one of the big questions you should probably all ask yourselves, honestly, as it says, where is my data? And then part of that next one is obviously, where's all of my endpoints? And if any of you can actually answer that one effectively, I will love you, hug you, and cuddle you when we're allowed to do social distancing stuff. In the meantime, I'm just going to say thank you, because so many companies don't actually understand where all of their endpoints are. It's a huge challenge. And an endpoint, by the way, isn't just the computer that's in front of you. It's the iPad that's next to you. It's the phone. It's the watch that you might be wearing that's connected up to it. It's your television and your Samsung fridge. It's the Alexa that's trying to sell you something, and the doorbell that you decided to buy, the electronic doorbell. It's all of these things have some level of access into your system. Therefore, they're an endpoint. And so some of it is really understanding that. And then obviously back to the where's my data and how close do I put it to some of those endpoints. And, you know, again, it's one of those things we come in and we help people understand that stuff. Why does my soccer knock hate me? You know, obviously there's so much data that comes into an operation center. I mean, we see it and we see the consequences of that. So it's how do I process it effectively? And then how do I actually bubble up the things that I care about? So I'm not just looking at noise. You know, we all talk about fidelity over quantity. So anything that's an issue, anything that's a problem, that's why a lot of the stuff that we've built out with the MSSP is really built not just for best of breed, but is actually taking it beyond that. So we've taken a look at the orchestration technology, which is automating a lot of it. We've taken a look at deception technology, which helps you really start to get ahead of where the bad guys are. We've taken a look at some very interesting stuff on the memory level and system level. So all of this is put together to help an organization become much more effective at how they prioritize all the issues and challenges, and obviously what they do about it. So, you know, the risk and maturity side of things. And again, you know, when we start looking at the Chamber of Commerce and the Halifax teams, it's how do we help them to help all their clients do that? So that's part of the effectiveness on that one. As the vendors come in and as somebody comes in, it's like, what questions do we want to ask them? It isn't just, does the widget have a new firewall? Is it a new year's worth? It's, how is it going to help? What is it going to do for me effectively? So, you know, we're really good at actually acting as the advocacy group for those ones. Again, you know, to Mary Beth actually runs that entire part of the organization. She's absolutely amazing. And if you guys aren't connected to her, you should probably hit her up on LinkedIn and everything. But, you know, she runs like the CISO side of that side of it. And so there's some amazing people that we can bring to bear to help basically be that solution for the organization. So it's kind of fun. It's kind of cool. And I get to interact with all sorts of amazing people. It's kind of cool. This last one is a good one. And I tend to, whenever we do risk modeling and whenever we go into an organization to do tabletops, we go in and we talk to the IT person and like, well, if my data center dies, then the company's down. But the manufacturing person goes, well, if you take a handful of sand and you throw it into the mill over there, we're not doing anything. The finance person goes, well, the markets have been tanking for the last month, so we haven't got any money to spend anyway. The CEO goes, actually, I got some other issues I want to deal with. And everybody comes to the table. Part of the deal that we have to look at, and as organizations you have to look at, obviously, is where do we focus the risk. So it's one of the things we tend to help with is it's not always an IT problem. Sometimes it's how do we support the finance folks. Sometimes it's how do we sit down with the manufacturing folks and help them become less risky, more mature from a security standpoint. And we're looking at, obviously the other side of the networking, the operational side of networking, or the critical infra side of networking. So there's a lot of really interesting questions that need to be asked. And again, it's having the advocate in your corner, which is, partnering up with the Halifax crew is really part of the reason for doing this. And then obviously, because we have so much depth of knowledge, we kind of know the questions to ask. Any more thoughts on this one, Richard?
Yeah, and I just want to mention, cybersecurity is not expensive if it's done right, basically. So we've taken, all the best of cybersecurity technologies, and we put it all together, and we simplified everything, and we've priced it right for the SMBs, and we are able to provide, 24/7, 365 security operations, incident response, and everything pretty much that the enterprise have today to the SMB. So I just want to make that known. And if you need more information, Mary Beth and the team, and just hit us up. We can give you that information from security awareness. Everything we've spoken about, we can really cater to the SMBs, and we've done that intentionally. So, Chris, back to you.
Yeah. No, that's a totally huge point. I think that is one of the frustrations I see in the industry is so much of the focus of the industry is on like the bigger stuff, which is why I've kind of got a bit of a soft spot for this one, because this is hey, we have to get everybody sorted out. And yeah, we've taken the best, we focused on the SMB market. All right, so why now? Why do we actually have to do this? And why do we need to think about doing it now? I mean, we've needed to think about doing it for a number of years, but why really now? I'm going to run through this one because I'm cognizant of the time at the moment. So I put this slide up on LinkedIn a while ago and everybody's like, oh, good grief. But it's simple. How it's communication mathematics. How quickly I can convince people as an attacker and as an adversary, how quickly I can get your email, your phone, your wireless, your passwords, your unattended, all of this stuff. Yet unfortunately, when it comes to the messaging about how to get through to people about doing something about it, we have two options. We either eventually continue to do this so that we eventually get through to people, or unfortunately, they end up on the incident response side of our business, at which point now we're coming in with Band-Aids and with computers at the same time, getting them back up and running after something has happened. So I guess my call out, my plea, my request, my desire is, let's try to actually get ahead of the problem for a change. Let's actually try to not deal with this when you're in the middle of an incident. The ounce of prevention, pound of cure, all of those kinds of analogies and everything. But this is a very, very simple one. It's like, look, let's actually get ahead of the problem. We know what the issue is. We know what's going on. Everybody knows there is a problem. We've only got to open up the newspaper. Let's actually do something about it. All right. Wise words from somebody else. I like this one. So this is my way of looking at things. And it's actually a really nice set of slides. And I mean, it's simple. We've come on different ships, but we're in the same boat. I can't overemphasize this one. We have all come at this from different angles. To the opening bios. I mean, Richard's had this organization for the best part of 14, 15 years or something. In that time, I've bounced all over the US and caused chaos and mayhem. And prior to that, jumping out of airplanes and all sorts of things. We've all come at this. We've looked at manufacturing people coming into this. We have people from industry, people from outside of industry, but we're all in this same issue together. We're all looking at the adversaries. We're all staring COVID down to both barrels as it's looking at us. We know the attackers are coming. It's what do we do about it? And what do we do about it collectively? Because, as it says on here, as individuals, we're not going to succeed. The odds are stacked wholly against us. It's really is as simple as that. So then we have to look at, how do we succeed together? How do we work together? And I think that's really, that was my reason for the CyberClan side of things, is there is this real kind of family. It's like, how do we solve this problem? So I kind of like this one. All right, we have gotten through our slides in the best part of 30 minutes, 35 minutes. I am going to somehow or other stop sharing my screen, and we will go to an open mic. I think if that's acceptable to everybody. Richard, you good with that? You guys good?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for all that really great info, Chris and Richard. I have heard one of those things before, which was that when people think that they're not a target because they don't have any useful information, someone told me, well, if it's valuable information to you, then it's valuable information, because, if you want it back, you're a potential target. So I think that really woke me up to some of the information I have too, like photos.
Here's another way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it. So as an attacker, and again, my background is a lot on the red human adversarial side. That's part of my research. Think about this: jigsaw puzzle. You ever done a jigsaw puzzle?
Yes.
Okay, so you get the 500 or 25 pieces up to 10,000 pieces. You dump it on a table. The first thing you look for is the edges. You look for the corners, you look for the edges. That's the equivalent of me taking your email address, going onto your LinkedIn profile, and taking any public information. So now I have the edges. Now I start sending you some emails, and I see that you're on Craigslist, or I see you're on these commerce sites. So I start getting in more information. As I do that, I start filling in more of the bits of the pictures. I figure out who you work for. I figure out the family. I figure out the house. I figure out all this information. Now I create more and more of a picture. And at some point in time, I have enough of the picture to go, you're mine.
Right.
And that's how we do it. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is so many organizations don't think about it that way. They're like, oh, nothing. Well, and even honestly, the piece of the jigsaw I care about you might let me into Richard's company, although not in the case of CyberClan. They're going to get repelled at the borders by the scary, hairy thing, let's face it. And so that's the idea, is it's really understanding that just these small nuggets of information all add up together.
Yeah. Just as we're chatting here, I'll be taking in some questions on the Q&A, and we can answer those. So Lisa's posed a question here. What's your position on G Suite for business and its security? Her business is set up on business platform and console.
Do you want to hit that one, Richard? Do you want me to hit that one?
You go ahead first, and then I can share what we've done just to kind of help.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, so in essence, it's pick your poison these days. You either go G Suite or you go the Microsoft world. Each one of those can be set up to be very, very secure and very, very effective. That's why you have two-factor authentication. That's why when you share documents, what I care about, I encrypt, and what I don't care about, I don't mind if it gets out there. But it can be set up to be effective. You can be very, very good at basically almost isolating your own portion of that G Suite effectively. So we have the two-factor setup, and a lot of the systems I use have a similar kind of setup. So I think it can be done as long as you take those extra steps. You can put policies in place. You can have, as the email comes in, you can have those filters actually set up so it doesn't like it. So again, it's taking those extra steps to go, how do I make this secure and safe?
Yeah, and if you're a small business, so I would recommend maybe using a Mac, because of the security and the investment that Apple puts in terms of security, having 2FA on your Apple ID and keeping everything up to date from that perspective. Then with your G Suite, looking at some of the 2FA that Chris mentioned, so definitely that's a bare minimum. Also, the email filtering with G Suite is quite decent. However, there are ways to bypass those. But yes, in terms of SMBs and some small business, I would highly recommend. And also monitoring, so for example, if you're accessing your G Suite from different locations, you get those alerts, just being on top of things. And if something doesn't make sense, you want to basically tackle that immediately, right? And not wait and start investigations, right? So start looking at hey, what is this IP? Was it me that accessed this? You do have 2FA. So how is this possible? Chances of you have 2FA, it'd be very difficult for the threat actor to, it's not impossible, but it'd be very difficult. Now, if you're talking about 2FA, are you talking about an SMS on your phone? Or are you talking about a phone call? I prefer a phone call than an SMS in some cases. But we're looking at YubiKeys in the future. We're actually rolling those out very soon. And Chris, you want to kind of explain maybe the YubiKeys perhaps?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, to Richard's point, there's definitely, as much as I love my phone, an SMS message can be, we call it spoofing. In other words, between, say, G Suite and your phone, there's a way of getting in the middle and sending messages, or even it gets really sneakier. What happens is I'll be sitting on the account, I'll want to authenticate, then I'm going to call you up and go, hey, I'm from G Suite. We've realized there's a problem in your account. Could you just read back the number that we sent you just to validate that you are who you say you are? And it's great because then somebody's like, oh yes, the numbers, and I'm sitting there typing it in and now I've got access to all your systems. So to Richard's point, there's all sorts of ways around that. The phone call is a perfect one. And then the YubiKey is another one. It's basically a USB key or a various different interface key that you can use that has that encryption and has that cyclical system built into it. Really, really nice technology, definitely some upsides on it. There's always some downsides, but it's like anything out there. But I like it because it's when we look at two factors, we look at something you have, the computer, and something you either are or have or own or something. So it's that separation. So that YubiKey that's mine. It's right in front of me, and I've got my computer and I've got this, and the two match together, and off I go. And if I don't have this, there's no way to spoof it, or there's no way to forge it or fake it, if that makes sense.
Great. We've got another question here around policies and practices that you have seen implemented at a smaller or medium-sized business that's really impressed you in terms of a company being prepared?
So there's some default stuff that's out there. I think even the simple acceptable use policy. So it's like, okay, I'm handing you, as a new person coming into the company, I'm handing you technology, I'm handing you data. What is my expectations of your responsibility? And then conversely, in order for me to expect that from you, what am I going to do to ensure the integrity of that? So if I look at you and go, hey, Margaret, I'm handing you like all of my data, you're like, cool, can I put it on eBay? Well, actually, no. Here's how you look at it. Here's how you look after it. Here's the training I'll provide you. Here's what you do with it. Here's how you manage it. Here's how you control it. And the acceptable use policy kind of goes into that. And then there's like overarching security policies. There's data integration policies. I think just an overall data policy is really, really useful as well. So acceptable use, like, what do I expect? You use the right computer for the right tool for the right job. And then how is that tool done? And what am I going to do to help train you, educate you, give you, to Richard's point, I'm going to give you the right tools, use them in the right way, please.
What do you do about enforcement, though? So that's great policy to have in place, but how do you ensure that it happens?
Oh, absolutely. That's the procedure and the control standpoint of it. Absolutely. I mean, there's ways of doing that. There's ways of doing monitoring on it. There's ways of doing analysis on it. I mean, that's where, to Richard's point, we hand you a computer. I'm going to have a heuristic system on. I'm going to have an antivirus, and I'm going to have monitoring tools that make sure the data stays, the integrity of the data, the machine, and everything else. So, but it's that two-part of it. It's like, look, this is what I'm going to give you, and these are the safety nets I'm going to put in place for when the worst case happens. Acceptable use is one, an overarching security policy, and quite honestly, given everything that we're going through now, that incident response, unfortunately, that's another huge one. Is like, what happens when something happens? Something we talk about. That's why we have a bunch of services that really do that. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I am going to apologize in advance. I am going to have to drop off very, very quickly and leave everybody else to it.
All right.
And I will let Richard. You're in.
Richard's going to be with us. We've got a few more minutes here.
Yeah, Richard's
one
amazing.
thing, so we're holding this meeting over Zoom, and a lot of companies are, but I also hear some companies say we're not using Zoom, it's not secure. We hear about Zoom bombing. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what an organization can do to ensure that it's got secure Zoom meetings, or should it be using a different platform entirely?
Go ahead, Chris, and then I can wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll give my thoughts on this one, and then I will definitely drop off. So I have a love-hate with pretty much every single webinar platform out there. They all have their pluses and minuses. You can make Zoom more secure. Nothing's perfect. Let's just, again, we'll put the stake in the ground and say nothing is perfect, and
Sure.
I'll prove otherwise. You can make Zoom more secure. You can put wait rooms in there. You can put passwords on it. We can do all the good things. You guys did that with this one. And so I think that really, really helps. So that's number one. You've got GoToMeeting, similar kinds of things. You have, I'm not a fan of the Cisco one because it drops so much other junk on the computer. It's almost like a Trojan and a virus on its own. And the Teams is another one. They all have their pluses and minuses. But again, with the instruction booklet is, here are ways to make it more secure and safer. And if you follow those, I think you can make pretty much anything to be less risky, should we say, right? With that,
passwords, wait rooms.
yeah, any of those kinds of things, make sure it's over a secure session. Make sure, to Richard's earlier point, you're using the VPNs in place. Make sure you're only inviting certain people. I mean, there's so many ways of actually doing it effectively.
Great.
All right. I am going to disappear off. I will let Richard answer the rest of you in amazing hands. Thank you very much. Hugely appreciated for putting this on. You guys rock, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much. And Richard, if we can keep you for a few more minutes, we have a few more questions. One I've heard a few times is around the use of cell phones. So obviously when we're in the office, we're using office phones all the time, but everybody's gone home now and we're using cell phones. I'm wondering if there's anything that we should be thinking of to protect work conversations and work content on cell phones.
Yeah, cell phones it's a bit tricky. So I guess for starters, from a cell phone perspective, your employer should have some sort of security safeguards on the cell phone in itself. So like an MDM or a AV scanner for starters, right? Just to kind of clean out the application. What type of applications are being installed? Is it your personal cell phone, and does it have work data? And if that's a yes, then now we have different problems, right? Because you have work data on a personal cell phone. Questions come in. What type of data are we looking at? Can we secure that data? Can we containerize that data? If you lose your phone, what happens to the data? Can that data be retrieved? Is there PII information? So those are some of the security concerns on the phone itself. Now, using the phone from, it's fine as long as you're using a TELUS cell tower, and we can ensure that that's a TELUS cell tower, because from a red team perspective, we're able to circumvent some of those communications as well. So again, you need to have those type of sophistication in order to intercept someone's data. Chances that it's difficult, but the internet, right? Are you using your personal internet at home through your Wi-Fi? What is your security practices on your own Wi-Fi? Is it a Starbucks hotspot that you're using to try and consume data? So those are all the questions. I would say, if you can use your own secure Wi-Fi hotspot, make sure you have the right passwords, WPA2 encryption or more if possible, and use the right apps, and you should be safe. So
another question we've had, and kind of related to that, but around bringing your own device. So should companies avoid a BYOD policy and use company issued PCs only?
It depends on the individual or the organization. My personal preference is, from a cybersecurity perspective, and because of the type of work we do, we would prefer to assign a secure phone, and our definition of a secure phone is different than others, to our individuals and people working in the field, right? So we expect a certain level of security, encryption, and we have more control on our data. So say, for example, if that phone was lost, we have features like remote kill or remote wipe on the phone. It would be very difficult to get access to our data or even get into our networks through our phone, right? So that would be my preference, but there are clients that, cost is an issue, so they would have their employees, bring in their phone, and then they could kind of, there would be some mechanisms in place to kind of compensate them for their cell phone and whatnot. And then they may have an agreement with HR where they would perhaps deploy some software just to kind of containerize or protect the work data. That's a bit more difficult to manage, and it's an HR issue at that point. It depends. But my preference is, it'd be better to assign a corporate phone and you had more control on your data.
Okay. Another question that I'm curious about is, we talked about passwords in your presentation, and I'm wondering, You know, some people write down their passwords, some people use password management services. You know, every site you go to these days requires a password. So what's your advice for password management?
You basically want to use a password manager. So I could recommend something like Dashlane, for example, would be a good starting point with YubiKeys. So you can have the YubiKey we mentioned with Dashlane, and you know you need that YubiKey to log into your Dashlane account, and then from there you would have all your other complex password to your TD Bank or your Royal Bank and everything else, right? So you can kind of set it up that way, and we use something similar in house as well. So I would say that would be a starting point, and I think you can get a free a personal account with Dashlane as well. So that's something I can recommend.
Dashlane?
Dashlane, yeah.
Okay. I'm maybe behind the times, but I've not heard of a YubiKey before. Can you, like I've seen little dongles that generate passwords. Is that what it is, or is it something else?
It doesn't generate passwords, but what it does is it has certificates on and it handles all the encryption. So so if you want to get more complex, and every individual can have their own key, and it's on that YubiKey, and it'd be very hard for a threat actor to circumvent that control, because you would physically need access to that key. Then you need to figure out the encryption, and that key would be that key into that specific software like Dashlane for authentication. And then you would need to, so you need many hoops to get to those crown jewels, or to those credentials. And then there are other techniques we have in place too. So the idea is just to make it very difficult and painful for the threat actor, right? So.
Okay. So I see we're just about out of time here. I'm got a top tip from Chris there that we should all Google the top 20 most common passwords, and that's a really good first step we could take. For company owners, small businesses, Richard, what's your top tip for something that we should do this afternoon to help increase our security?
I would say have a look at the Canadian government's baseline cybersecurity controls for small business. It basically has a whole bunch of baseline controls, you know, from AV to strong authentication, you know, pretty much some of the items we covered today. So just have a look at those baseline controls, see if you can follow those and apply to your business. It's out there, it's free, and you know, leverage that if possible. So.
Super. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share those insights with our membership. So really want to thank everyone else who's attended as well for your questions and for being on our webinar today. We're hosting more webinars every week with the Chamber, with experts in banking, recovery, and more. We've also recorded this webinar, so it will be available to all attendees shortly on our YouTube channel, the Halifax Chamber channel. And we have a short survey right now to help us shape future webinar content. So we want to know what types of webinars you'd like to see. So we'd really appreciate if you could take a minute to fill that out. We'll send it via email today. And thanks again to you, Richard, and to your colleague, Chris. Really appreciate CyberClan taking part today.
Thank you. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.